a lot to process here. Alex Volkanovski defeating Yair Rodriguez via third round TKO. What a performance out of him. And we'll talk about what's next. Pantoja defeats Brandon Moreno via split decision. Great fight back and forth. Two of the judges had 48-47 for Pantoja. One judge, the darling of the online community and a great judge by every, metric, Ben Cartledge, had it 49-46 for Moreno. One of the few times that I can remember him being the outlier, if you will. Dricus du Plessis shocking the world and defeating Robert Whittaker in the second round, stamping his ticket as the number one contender in the middleweight division. And then, of course, that scene afterwards with Israel Adesanya. We are going to do a deep dive into all of that, so stay tuned. From the beginning of this rivalry until now. Dan Hooker, as I mentioned, beat Jalen Turner via split decision. Bo Nickel continues to impress. He beats Val Woodburn in 38 seconds via knockout, TKO to be exact. And that right hand, it was like a right hook, it sounded like a firecracker going off. And again, this is a national champion wrestler. This is one of the best American wrestlers of the last 20, 30 years. And he keeps knocking people out. It's freaking nuts. And spare me the talk about the level of opponent. The guy is what, 5-0 at this point? 5-0. He shouldn't be fighting killers. This is give me 10 more of these. Build up the highlight reel. Give me 10 more of these wins and just let him flourish. And then I can assure you you'll have a superstar on your hands. That was the blueprint with Mike Tyson back in the day. Just, if you're going to keep knocking people out, keep knocking them out. Keep feeding him, fight him every 2-3 months, and keep piling these up until we get to 10-12-0. The Robbie Lawler send-off might have been the greatest send-off in the history of the UFC. They couldn't have delivered that any better, produced that any better. He wins via 38-second knockout, walk-off knockout against Nico Price. And then they have this great video montage waiting to go, and they don't play it when he leaves the cage. They play it with him in the cage, standing next to Joe Rogan, do the picture-in-picture, crying, lip quivering. His lip was quivering before he even entered the cage. Never seen this kind of emotion out of Robbie. It was beautiful to see him get that love, get that shine. And again, gave me a headache seeing all the people saying he should be on the main card. So many more people saw that on ABC. Who cares if it's literally 20 minutes later? But guess what? 20 minutes later, it's in front of a fraction of the audience. That was exactly where he needed to be. And almost like symbolic of how far the sport has come to see this guy who started like in the dark ages of the UFC, 34, 37, whatever it was, and then ends up on ABC. It's freaking nuts. Beautiful stuff. And they nailed it. Like, beautiful. I even had to reach out to some of the people who work on the broadcast to say, like, kudos to you guys. Bravo. It was just amazing the way they handled that. From the walkout, everything from the opponent to the date to the venue to the walkout to the Hall of Fame stuff 2 days before to, like, it was just amazing. I wish all the legends could get love like that. I wish Shogun got that sort of love in Brazil. I wish it was every single time like that. Do it like that. That's the blueprint. And guess what? I'm expecting nothing less from this point forward because now we know you have it in you. It's perfect. Please keep doing it that way. It was amazing. It was incredible. I loved it. I can't say enough good things about it. And so that was just a beautiful highlight. Tetsuro Taira had a solid win. Denise Gomez had a very impressive win, 22nd win. Alonzo Menefield defeated Jimmy Crute. And by the way, I reached out to Jimmy Crute's team. No response here, but there's a time difference. To ask if he actually retired. He took off the gloves, but there's no actual clarification, at least that I saw. Maybe I missed it. Was there a clarification, guys? Did you see any clarification about the gloves?
No, I don't believe there was.
Would be somewhat surprising considering his age, just 27. I know it's been a tough go, but anyway, maybe we'll get a response while we're on the air. Vitor Petrino had a very impressive submission win. Cameron Simon had a very impressive win. He continues to be one of the great prospects in the sport. Jesus Santos Aguilar was, I think, the lone Mexican-born fighter who was successful on the night. It was a tough one. He won in 17 seconds, so that was tremendous and looked like it could have been a sign of things to come. And Esteban Robovic had an amazing win to start the card. I mean, there was no stinker on this card, really. There was no stinker. It was tremendous. Great action from top to bottom. And, I will ask the guys, I think this is a really interesting question to start with, and I'll ask you guys this, GC, Rick. What was the biggest story of the night on Saturday? Because I could think of at least like legit, if I'm being honest, I could think of legit 3, but I think you could make a case for 4 or 5. What was like the everlasting story, image, storyline, whatever you want to say, coming out of Saturday? What would you say, New York Rick, first?
DDP has arrived, and he's going to fight Israel Adesanya.
Okay, that's a great one. And that was the third to last fight on the card, which is very interesting. What about you, GC?
Yeah, I actually agree with Rick here.
Interesting.
Yeah, just like when you say everlasting, what's the most talked about thing coming away from it? It's DDP. I mean, just upsetting, shocking the world, as you said, beating Robert Whittaker by like crazy knockout too. Like this wasn't like some close, dicey decision or anything like this. Like he took it to Robert Whittaker, first guy to beat him, not named Israel Adesanya in 9 years. The way that he did it, the post-fight interaction between him and Adesanya, and everything that comes along with that, I think that's the biggest story.
I thought one of you would say, Volkanovski, this is arguably the pound-for-pound best fighter on the planet. Like, but clinically.
That's the thing about it. It's kind of expected. At least it was for me. I didn't think Yair was going to be competitive in this fight.
Did you not feel like it became like the sexy thing to say Yair was going to beat him?
For sure.
It did,
sure.
and I did not get on that
think
train.
So, yeah. He's just too damn good. He's so professional out there, right? And I don't mean professional in the way he speaks. Like, he's just a professional fighter. Like, the way he actually fights.
He does not make mistakes.
It's unbelievable.
So, the Islam performance.
Yeah.
Incredible. Obviously, Yair this past weekend. Holloway last year. Just like jaw-dropping dominance, and then the Korean Zombie. His last 2 years, 2022 and 2023, like every time he's entered the octagon, he has wowed me. It's almost like he's taken another step in how much he's impressed me.
But to that end, though, he's almost done himself harm in the regard to like it's hard to be shocked at how good he is anymore. You know what I mean? Like he's so good that it's like you have to be a DDP to make me open my eyes a little bit. For Volk, I'm just like, that's just the best fighter on the planet.
Me and Rick we watched the main event together on the watch party, and it was almost like we had to kind of think of stuff to say because it was just sort of like it was just one-way traffic, just kind of this is the norm. This is what we get out of Volk fights these days. He just dominates them from pillar to post.
I do think he's a bigger star, though. I do think that despite. Sometimes like you rack DJ would be a perfect example. Like Volk is a much bigger deal.
The Islam fight, in my opinion, did wonders for that. I think the Islam fight was a real turning point in terms of him starting to get that respect. In my opinion, I think that was the one. That was where it flipped.
Okay, so I agree with that. I think being home in Australia played a big part. As we've said before, like when Stipe fought in Cleveland, he felt like a bigger superstar. When Conor fought in Dublin, felt like we could go on. When Bisping fought in London, so that was huge. I think the turning point began with the Ortega fight. I think prior to the Ortega fight, people actually hated him because they felt like Holloway beat him. Right, like there was I remember doing an interview with him on the side of the road at the ESPN days, and like he was getting so much shit after that fight because everyone loved Holloway, right? Like, people hated this guy. Now I feel like everyone loves him. Like, who hates Volkanovski? I mean, it's like almost like you got to...
Only Jed Meshew.
Does he really hate him? What is there to hate about him?
Hates him. I mean, he was...
Hates him as a fighter or as a person?
I think a little bit of both.
I think.
Yes, he was preying on his downfall as we were going into the main event. He's like, the only way this night could get any better is if your masterclass
How is that possible? He's like salt of the earth.
I think he'll weigh in.
I've fought this battle too.
One of the things I think is that Volk does go to the well a lot on the everybody doubted me thing.
Oh, fuck off.
I can't remember the last time he said it.
By the way, that's the big point of contention.
He does it so many times. Make me a highlight tape. I want like make me a hight, like a TikTok highlight mixtape of him saying that.
I think you could.
But that's the thing you have against him.
Hey, don't shoot the messenger. Jed, please save me, weigh in. I'm not trying to make this argument. I appreciate Alexander Volkanovski. He is the best fighter on the planet.
I see a comment here in the YouTube chat from Brandon QFG. Once Volk went bald, he's unstoppable. I don't remember when he went bald, but maybe there's something to that.
It was into the Ortega fight. I mean, that's
that was the first time he shaved his head.
Because we could see how red, and how purple he was going. And I'm not gonna lie, I was looking at older pictures when he had hair. He looks infinitely better bald. Like, he looks fantastic bald. He's an inspiration to me to go bald. That's how good he looks now that he's bald.
You're considering
I remember him playing it up during that fight
for a while. You know, it's all about just pulling the trigger. Volk is an inspiration. I'm like, I see him with hair. I'm like, God, he looks so much better bald. I wish he had done it earlier. He looks so good bald.
I love it.
He's a freaking, even hanging out with Jamal Murray. How cool is that?
Walking into the arena with Jamal Murray, and then Jamal Murray hangs out after, like they're just boys.
Jamal's sitting in the freaking press conference taking pictures like a fanboy. Shout out to Jamal, fellow Canadian, DM'd over the weekend.
NBA champion Jamal Murray.
Yes. What did I say?
No, we're just putting an emphasis.
How crazy it is.
I think fellow Canadian is pretty cool
with Jamal Murray.
And not as, but sure.
Kitchener, Ontario's own.
Don't even know where that is. Tremendous.
That is tremendous. I think the turning point came Ortega because he was met with adversity. He defied the adversity, and then it just looked like this guy was choosing death over tapping. Like, he was ready to go out, and then somehow freaking got out of it twice. That round, by the way, doesn't get enough love. Getting out of 2 of those submissions. What?
I think everybody called it round of the year. I think it got more than enough love.
I would argue one of the greatest rounds in UFC title fight history.
For sure.
I
agree.
I have such a vivid memory of that because that was the first pay-per-view after I started the show. I was like pacing around my apartment as that round was going on. Like, I couldn't sit down. It was insane.
Then there was the Chan Sung Jung, and I think that he showed some remorse for Zombie. Remember in that fight? And I think he got some love for that.
That's why I think that almost like went back. It reset a little bit after that because again, not a competitive fight, and nobody thought it would be competitive going in. I think he lost a little momentum toward it and got it back with Islam.
Fair.
Because I think it was the way that he dominated, and then he went into Max like a month.
Well, actually,
later.
don't discount the appearance on the Monday after the win right here on this program, Cooking with Volk Live. I think
Cooking with Volk
went from Jacksonville to New York, 48 hours. I had the champ in studio cooking with us. That was a huge deal.
For him to the top
Max, he shut it up. Then he went to Islam and now Yair. He's a big deal. Can we talk?
Just quickly, Rick has said it multiple times on the program. Like, winning cures everything, and winning as dominant as he is, like. And then the fight that he put up with Islam, it's hard not to root for him.
And he has that GSP quality where it's like he's actually so good that you could say like, oh, he's boring, he's this and that, he's not fun, but he's perfect. Like, he'll never. I mean, these are the famous last words, but like, he'll never do anything that will embarrass the sport, the UFC. He's just like the perfect poster boy, I feel like, right now for the sport. And even I was listening to Bill Simmons talk about his weekend at the event. He was there. Shout out Bill and Ben Simmons, his son, who's a huge MMA fan. And he was talking about Volk, and like, they're just talking about him like a star. And I'm like, fuck yeah, this is great. Volk getting that love. Like, they're talking about him like people would talk about, Tyson Fury or other like great fighters. Because I worry sometimes that Volkanovski doesn't get that mainstream love. And I feel like he's finally getting it. And it was very cool that he, got the International Fight Week main event slot. I wonder how the pay-per-view does. And it is a shame that he's not going to fight in Sydney. So let's actually briefly touch on that. What do you guys think happens here? Because these are the permutations. He talked on Monday or Wednesday of last week on the show about Sydney, and also mentioned that his wife is going to most likely give birth that week, which just shows like the madman that he is. That he's a nut job. Yeah, like most humans would be like, no, I want off.
Yeah.
And so that's in 2 months. Okay. But he really wants the Islam fight, and Islam isn't fighting off of the Abu Dhabi card. He's a lock for that, I would imagine. And I think we all thought that Charles Oliveira was going to fight Islam in October after the win in Vancouver over Beneil Dariush. But then Charles Oliveira said over the weekend, I believe he said it first to MMA Junkie, that he's unavailable. And I don't know if he's negotiating via the media or in public, but he doesn't seem like that kind of guy. Unavailable.
He in the past has seemed like the guy who would always talk about the fight.
Yeah.
He would always be leaning that way instead of the other way. So I would assume it's not negotiation, but it's a fair point to question. But he always seems like I'm going to be there no matter what. Give me a month. Like, I think he was talking about turning around for that January Brazil card after fighting right before that. So yeah, he's that guy who goes the other way for sure.
So then when I heard that, I was like, oh shit, if Volk wins and doesn't get hurt, this is now the lock, right? Because I think Volk cares more about getting the rematch with Islam than he does fighting in Sydney. Because that's just the type of dude. He says he's going to turn up. By the way, I mentioned that. Do you guys know what I'm talking about with that? Like, he says it in the clip. He's just like, yeah, I'm gonna go and I'm just gonna maybe turn up in Abu Dhabi. The way people talk about, I know what turn up means, but and I know it's like an Australian thing, but he just talks about it so casually. Like, he's just gonna pop on over to Abu Dhabi, fight the number one dude, and then fucking walk away with his belt. Like, there's just something very casual about the whole thing that is very endearing.
But he's able to say that because he does that.
Yeah.
He's the guy who, if I commit, if I tell you I'm going to be there, I'm going to be there. If the opportunity is there for me to turn around. The one thing that he does say a lot is talking about being active. He ain't lying. The dude ain't joking when he talks about that. He wants to fight and he wants to keep fighting, and you have to respect that. And him and Israel Adesanya in particular are kind of like a different breed when it comes to that. When it comes to turning around and getting back in there.
Those two dudes in particular, the most reliable and active champions in recent UFC history. I think there's no denying that whatsoever. There's just something different about them.
It almost hurts them too, though, right? They go through the challengers quick. Go to the challengers quick, and then it's like, what's left to do? But back.
But in this case, he actually has two options. Mm-hmm. So as he's walking out, there's Topuria. Great job by Topuria. I thought he was freaking, and I know Volk kind of called him over, but like that's the shit.
Him over the rail.
That's the shit that you need to help sell yourself. Great job by Topuria. I love how he always calls Topuria a bloke. He's like, yeah, I don't want to break his heart, that bloke, but I'm gonna, rough him up, and I hope no one gets to him first. So you have that scenario now. He mentions in the post-fight press conference, that he is probably in need of surgery, which is crazy because it sounded like he was referring to something that happened before the fight because he was so resolute about it. So what the hell happens now with Volk? And by the way, what the hell happens with Islam? Because if there's no Volk and there's no Charles Oliveira, that to me feels like the stakes just got a little bit greater for the Poirier-Gaethje rematch on July 29th because I could see that guy sliding in. I don't even know what the answer is to all of this.
In the post-fight press conference, he did a little bit to dissuade the idea that he couldn't be ready for October, even with the surgery.
I know he says that, but he's a crazy person. What?
He's who he is.
That's in 3 months.
Joe Lopez said it would take 6 to 8 weeks for recovery, which puts us at like beginning of September, mid-September area.
Remember, he has fought the guy before, right?
I know, it's Islam.
He has a hand injury. He broke his hand against Max Holloway, I think, and he was dealing with the recovery for that.
And turned around as fast as possible.
When he went and weighed in as the backup fighter.
Yeah.
So, I feel like
he's a crazy person. It's actually deja vu all over again from that situation where he rushed it. It was from Holloway, July 4th weekend, whatever it was.
Fight week last year.
Yeah. And then trying to get on, and so there's a part of me that wonders if he tries to get the surgery like this week.
That feels like the fight to make. If he says he can do it, I'm never gonna not believe his word.
I think that Topuria Volk fight is one of, if not the best fight you can make in the UFC. Right?
What if you do this? What if you do Volk Topuria and Poirier-Gaethje winner?
Okay, but now we're talking about tight turnarounds. Like
3 months.
Yeah, but what if they go to war, as we're expecting? Yeah. Those two, if you're gonna put money on which of these upcoming fights is gonna be a barn burner that they near kill each other, that's probably a good one. That's probably
But you know what? Threw out the idea that if Conor McGregor couldn't fight this year, Michael Chandler fights Islam in Abu Dhabi.
I don't see it happening.
I mean,
I think that's a tough sell. I mean, look.
Islam versus anybody will sell, but
when Alex Gustafsson got brutally knocked out in Sweden and his next fight was a title fight against DC, nothing would surprise me. So Chandler coming off a loss almost a year ago at this point and getting a title shot wouldn't surprise me. I could see it happen and they could spin it and we'll eat it up and that'll be that. But if Poirier or Gaethje are ready and they're coming off a win, I don't know how you don't do that fight. in Abu Dhabi if Volk and Charles are unavailable. You know what I mean?
So you're saying right now, pecking order, Volk ahead?
I don't know, honestly, because I'd like to see the Topuria Volk fight, and I think if you put Topuria in there against someone else, you're risking what just happened to Arnold Allen.
Or you're creating a star like you did with DDP versus Whittaker.
1,000%.
10 times bigger fight.
1,000%. 1,000%. Yeah, we were all wrong about that.
Neither are
Not me.
guarantees.
No, not me. I wasn't wrong. I've been beating this drum for as long as it can possibly be beat. I wasn't wrong. I'm not taking any
What?
of that blame.
We're wrong about what?
I've been saying
I said
Robert
it was a
Whittaker
risk.
and Max Holloway deserve to fight contenders.
But that's not what I'm saying. And I think we all agreed on this. It was a risk, and the risk ended up paying off. It was a risk to put him in there.
Let's roll those dice one more time, baby.
Of course, it's a risk. There's no guarantee of what's going to happen.
Let's do it.
So it's interesting time.
Max Holloway versus Ilya Topuria. Make the fight.
That can't happen.
They got
He's
Korean
fighting
Zombie.
Korean Zombie, and that will
Is
screw
he
up
though?
everything.
I mean,
No,
He is.
I think this is the retirement fight.
Yeah, that's the peace out Korean Zombie.
Why are we doing this?
Oh, honestly, after seeing
this?
Robbie Lawler, can we give
Yeah.
fucking Zombie? Can we give him?
Why
me?
are we doing
Like,
this?
can we give him Zombie's like the most beloved fighter in UFC history? I don't want
I
to. See
almost
him
feel
get
like Max
battered.
is doing it as like a gift to him. Like we're the old school. Here's this gift, but it's like he's gonna beat him up. That's the
sure
gift.
Max is like a minus 1,000 going into that one.
It's the word. I don't understand
I know.
it. I don't understand that fight.
I really want to see Volk Topuria.
I do too.
Very
Look,
much so.
I want to see that
do
fight.
too.
I'm game for it.
I
But
really think it's like,
Does it go any different
skill-wise-
though than Volk and Yair?
I think so, yeah.
You think Topuria does a better?
I think Topuria.
I think Topuria shows out.
a better chance?
I think it's a great fight. And imagine if Topuria somehow pulls it off.
I think Topuria's
star on our hands.
A
defensive-
megastar.
His defensive grappling is going to be a little bit sharper. He's going to be a little bit harder to take down.
His grappling period will be better. I mean,
Yeah,
and his boxing is great. He's not really like a kickboxer like Yair is. He's not going for the crazy movements. Like he just showed against them at how solid his boxing is. It's such a good fight. Love both dudes. That's really the fight that I want to see.
My ultimate conclusion on all of it is I think Alexander Volkanovski should get to choose whatever he wants. That's
No matter
where
what, he's
that's
in
where
a
I
great
net.
place.
By the way-
I mean, option A, option B. It's not a bad look for him.
Credit to Dana White. He pretty much said that, which he doesn't often say. He's like, we're going to defer to him, which
He should.
Sick.
He should be allowed
Love
that
it.
honor.
Love it.
yeah, 100%. Which he has earned that. He has earned that 100%.
If you're Islam, who do you want? I feel like you want Volk. Is that not the biggest fight?
I mean, Islam's in a great spot.
Out of the options that he has, yeah. I mean,
Volk's
it
a
is
great
big
fight. Poirier is a great fight. Charles is a fucking superstar.
Oh, well, no.
Right,
I
but
mean,
if
Charles is not available.
Oh,
He
I'm
will
just-
be on Abu Dhabi. Like it's almost like they've put him on the shelf.
Sure, but
like, all right, he's going to be on Abu Dhabi.
Charles is not available. Otherwise, I would agree.
the three options are all amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Volk rematch, Poirier Gaethje winner, Oliveira. Like there's no bad choice. There may be a little bit like Oliveira might be the most popular one of the bunch worldwide.
Oh, for sure.
Poirier is beloved.
For
Gaethje's
me,
beloved.
Charles is one if he's in, but he's
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, he's out.
Let's see. Let's
Oh,
see.
wait, what?
No. I mean, he just said that. I never disregard negotiating through the media.
Okay.
I never disregard that.
I like it.
Okay, so we're going to talk about Pantoja and that great fight with Pantoja in about 30 minutes.
Goodness gracious.
So, could we talk about DDP? DDP gets the win, and he shocks everyone. What was DDP via finish? It was like
I don't know what it was via finish. He was like plus 300 on the money line. Like he was definitely being doubted by not just Vegas, but I feel like fans and media alike.
His style is so awkward. He's like bouncing up and down, and it looks like he has no business. And then you see like Whittaker is just so smooth out there, and he's jabbing away, and he's doing all this stuff. And then he always figures it out. Credit to him. He wins the fight. He stops Whittaker, as you just said. Only guy that Whittaker has lost to in the middleweight division, not named Israel Adesanya. And then afterwards he gets on the mic and it's all well and good. And they cut to Israel, who on this show talked about manifesting this. This is the one that he wanted. Cut to him. And that's the thing, because obviously the post-fight stuff was so talked about and it was so heated and emotional and uncomfortable to watch to a degree. I wish they just would have kept Izzy off to the side, cage side, staring at him, because that was so intense. It was just like, I don't want to see these guys touch for 2 months. And that's the other thing. 2 months is a freaking short amount of time. Like no one turns around in 2 months. But God bless if he does. it was so great with Izzy just staring there and like huffing and puffing and him doing his thing, and he shocks the world. And then they brought Izzy in and everything went off the rails. And it kind of soured the whole thing because they just got uncomfortable and whatnot. And I think what ended up happening was, and you guys tell me if you feel otherwise, to the general public, or at least the social media world that we reside, but also I feel like the people in attendance, they helped turn DDP into a little bit of a favorite in that one, because I think they thought that he was more composed in that exchange. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
And had they not done that, I think that he would, because he was getting booed for two reasons. I think number one, because people love Robert Whittaker and he just beat him, and number two, because they love Izzy and he's the next foe. And I think had they kept it that way, Izzy would have gotten all the love this. But now it made for like an interesting little turn.
Yeah, for what it's worth, he seems pretty steady in that regard. Dricus is always pretty smooth and pretty calm and knows what he's very self-assured. I'm going to do this. This is my goal. Here's what's coming. And I think that came across in the post-fight as well. He was very focused, and he seems to be that type of person. He's relentlessly focused on the task at hand and not necessarily about the drama of it, you know? Like
100%. I felt he remained very calm, and he had good answers back to what Izzy was yelling at him.
Yeah. Is my mic on?
Yes,
yeah.
Okay, it's back on. And so I wanted to do, so this has become a real hot topic. And I think we have done a great job on this program over the past 2 years since coming back, thanks in large part due to GC's investigative skills. In when it comes to these like heavy duty topics, we like to bring out the actual facts in chronological order and let you decide who's telling the truth, who's not, who's in the right, who's not, or just to understand where this is all coming from. We did it with the James Krause situation. We've done it with others as well. And I think that we should do it with the rivalry and the genesis of it between DDP and Israel Adesanya. So GC has done a great job of compiling all the materials. And as I've mentioned before, it is complicated, it is divisive, it is at times uncomfortable, and do have to acknowledge that, you know, we don't live in Africa. We did not live through the history. We did not, we were not subjected to it. We don't have family members who've lived through it or currently live there. We're all white. We talk like this is uncomfortable stuff. But it is going to, in my opinion, get even worse. And I think it's just important to put all the cards out and let people understand, comprehend where this is all coming from and where it all started and how it has evolved as well. Because there's no right, wrong. There's no good guy, bad guy in this one. There's definitely a lot of nuance. And I don't know if honestly sports and fighting and the UFC cage fighting in particular is the best place for all this stuff. Pro wrestling has been tapping into this type of stuff for decades upon decades. But other than some instances here and there, I can think of a few rivalries that tapped into this type of stuff. We have been spared. We have been spared from it over the years. So here we go. Let's dig into the genesis of this, if we will, for the next 20 or so minutes, and let's begin where this all started back on March 1st, prior to UFC 285, at a media availability. DDP was asked about becoming a champion and what that would mean to him. Here's his response.
Or do you see this as an opportunity? Now you do get to be the guy if and when they show up to Africa.
Well, I mean, did those belts ever go to Africa? As far as I know, it came to America and New Zealand. I'm going to take a belt to Africa. I'm the African fighter in the UFC. Myself and Cameron, we breathe the African air. We wake up in Africa every day. We train in Africa. We're African born. We're African raised. We still reside in Africa. We train out of Africa. That's an African champion, and that's who I'll be.
Okay, so that's at the media availability. Some of the key words to look at there: I'm the African fighter in the UFC, African born, African raised. Obviously, there were 3 African born champions, and you know, they didn't just enter the world and then leave 10 minutes later. But those were, I thought, like the key sort of seeds to, making this all sprout into the situation that it has become. On March 15th, so 2 weeks later, prior to UFC 286, Kamaru Usman was asked about these comments. This is what he said.
Did you see Dricus? Did you hear Dricus du Plessis? That's a difficult name to pronounce. His comments about being the African fighter in the UFC.
Oh, I actually saw that. I think it's this week or last week. My one of my former teammates sent it to me. They're trying to be messy, of course. I saw it, and the thing about me is just I try not to be quick to jump on someone and really kill them for those things. I'm not part of this cancel culture, but though I understand what he's trying to say, but the one thing that I think he's failing to realize is, just because I go to China and my parents are in China and I'm raised in China, that doesn't make me more Chinese than the people from China. That doesn't make me more Chinese. And so just because you went over to South Africa and you were raised there, that doesn't make you African. So, I would say to him, it's just, try to be a little bit more careful with what you say and how you say it, because, that's the thing nowadays is these younger guys and these newer guys that get up here and they just talk. They just, because they want to appeal to the fans, appeal to the people. But try to be more mindful, because 20 years from now, that's not going to age well.
So there's Kamaru Usman, part of the Leon Edwards trilogy fight. Try to be more careful with what you say. Interpretation, all these things matter. And again, with a history that is so complex and divisive, and we all know where that history comes from and what it's all about, especially in that country and in that continent, but specifically the country of South Africa, where there's no denying and there's no interpretation. Like, it's just one way. It's all there. You can read about it, and it didn't conclude all that long ago. Or I should say it concluded not that long ago. It's hard to ignore. April 8th, after his win at UFC 287, Israel Adesanya was asked about DDP's comments. So this is now a little over a month later.
I want to whoop his ass so bad. I want to whoop his ass so bad. I want to do it in South Africa or Nigeria. And but he's got to do work. He's got to do something. Show me something so I can whoop that ass and I can show you history. I'll remind you, because you got to choose your words wisely when you speak on people that have come before you, people that paved the way for you. You got to pick your words wisely. You want to try and be a big boy. You want to bamba. You want to G with the big boys. You got to choose your words wisely, but I don't want to give him no clout. But if he does work, and I pray to God he keeps winning, I will gladly drag his carcass across South Africa. Wallahi.
All right, so that's after his win over Alex Pereira. Shortly thereafter, Dricus goes on social media and writes, "So you won't say my name? That's smart, you better not. I don't need your airtime at all. I have my whole continent of Africa, all caps, behind me. Go enjoy your very spectacular victory at home in New Zealand. UFC Africa is far from being done at least another year. I'll meet you on neutral ground this year, and if you still feel so strongly about facing me and I take your belt home, I'll give you another chance to come to try to face me on my home soil of Africa. We are Africa. We fear nothing and certainly nobody." And so, as you can see, this is starting to get very personal and very divisive. Personally, this is where I started to think, what's with all the my home, my Africa, all that stuff? These guys are born in Africa, no different than me, a proud Canadian who lives and resides in America. I still very much consider myself a Canadian, no different than a Jack Hermanson who is from Norway and fights out of Sweden. Like, we've seen this, this is what immigration is all about. But again, considering the history, it's hard to ignore, all the other stuff around all of this. And it feels like a very it feels like a very divisive route to take when all that needed to be said, in my opinion, was I'll be the greatest African champion of all time. Those guys are great. I'm going to be even greater. I'm going to defend my title 20 times. I'm going to be the best version of a UFC champion from this country. They were awesome, much respect. But the whole I'm more African than you because I breathe the air and I'm African born, African raised is going to strike a chord, and it did strike a chord. Shortly after his comments, his coach, DDP's coach, Morne Visser, posted this. As a coach, I don't believe it's my place to get involved with the politics between the fighters, but today I do. Dricus has been crucified by many watching him fight in the UFC for his gas tank. Well, here are some facts never disclosed to the public or his opponents. He has just had a nose surgery, which was supposed to happen 3 years ago. Total oxygen intake through both his nostrils of about 8% for the last 3 years. We signed with UFC knowing this, but we also knew that you don't say no for any fight that the boss man Dana White offers you. He doesn't like expletives. We fought 3 times in the last 7 months, crushing our opponents with almost no oxygen during the rounds. The problem was fixed last week. So Izzy, you are in shit with your one-dimensional fighting style. We are not going to wait for the UFC to come to South Africa. We will take the belt from you in August this year. And if you are still in the game, you can come and try to take it back in South Africa when the UFC comes to South Africa. As proven, Dricus, the real African with an African passport, which again, what do you mean? I have 2 passports. I have a kid. All this stuff, this feigning ignorance of not knowing what this would trigger and where this would cut is baffling to me. Finishes careers like in the last 3 fights in the UFC with only 8% oxygen. Just imagine what he is going to do to you, the New Zealander, with a full gas tank. Dual citizenship doesn't exist here. It's not a thing. It doesn't apply. You're not allowed. And so we continue in that regard, and it continues to get more and more personal. After that, on April 12th, on this show, I asked DDP about the comments. Here's one of his answers regarding them. It seemed like the first one that was up was Kamaru Usman, and he took issue with your comments and spoke about your comments, responded to. Did you see Kamaru's response to your initial statement about the African-born champions?
Yes, I absolutely did. I saw his comments, and I don't know if there's confusion, but Kamaru obviously didn't see my interview. It's Kamaru's. You probably didn't see the whole thing. So immediately they went to Dricus, said he is more African than Kamaru Usman, and the champions, the African-born champions. I never said those words, not even close to. I simply stated the fact that I am the only. If I'm wrong, I would say sorry immediately. You, one of them, reside in Africa. And that I did not even mention this towards them. I didn't talk about them. I talked about myself. I was not aiming anything at them. I was aiming something at myself, that I will be the first champion that resides in Africa, that will take his belt home to Africa. I never said they weren't African or I was more African. Of course they're African. And I respect them a whole lot. I mean, Usman is one of the greatest to ever do it. Adesanya is one of the greatest middleweights to ever walk this earth. Now, I never took anything away from them in that aspect. The only thing I said is that I'm still residing in Africa, and I will bring my belt back home to Africa, which is my home, where I reside. If we are sending out postcodes and addresses, mine's got to be in Africa. And that's the facts of the matter. I never said they were not African or I was more African or anything in that way. I only stated that I want to be and will be the first residing African champion.
So now that comment is fresh in our minds. Just for the record, let's go back to the original comment from March 1st. You heard what he just said. That's all I said. It was, I'm the only one residing here. Just for the record, go back to the March 1st comments.
Or do you see this as an opportunity? Now you do get to be the guy if and when they show up to Africa.
Well, I mean, did those belts ever go to Africa? As far as I know, it came to America and New Zealand. I'm going to take a belt to Africa. I'm the African fighter in the UFC. Myself and Cameron, we breathe the African air. We wake up in Africa every day. We train in Africa. We're African born. We're African raised. We still reside in Africa. We train out of Africa. That's an African champion, and that's who I'll be.
African born, African raised. And for the record, they have brought their belts back. So again, it wasn't just about who's residing, and I don't even know why that matters, but if it does matter, great. I don't know how you can now, I believe, feign ignorance and say, oh, I'm just talking about residing when you're talking about African born, African raised, and given the history, and I keep talking about it, and look it up if you want. I'm not going to give you a history lesson here, but just look it up. Type in apartheid, and you'll learn all about it. And it ain't that old. And to ignore all of that, to me, is feigning ignorance. Now, we move along, and after that comment on the show, I actually asked him specifically about race and about whether or not that's playing into any of this. So for the record, here I am trying to show all sides of the equation here. I have no dog in this race whatsoever. Dricus has been on the show, I don't know, 5 or so times. Izzy as well. Here's what he had to say about that. Do you understand why this may have rubbed some people, including Kamaru and Israel, who we'll get to in a moment, the wrong way, given the history between whites and blacks in Africa?
Well, to bring color into it, for me, is the most ridiculous thing ever. That is the one thing that, from this whole thing, that really pisses me off, to be honest, is that color was brought into it. I've never even mentioned color because it makes absolutely no difference to me. And to every single person that I know, it makes absolutely no difference. Color is not, it's not the topic at discussion. And if anybody is bringing in color, if is bringing in the fact that I'm white or they are black or any form of race in any way, that is, to me, absolutely ridiculous. This is a sport. This is fighting. Once you get into a sport, once we get into fighting, sport as a whole is what brings people together. There's no place for race and mentioning of color at all. And that really pisses me off, that Kamaru Usman is somebody I respect extremely. And I've shared the training mats with him. And he went on to say, and he did not say this out of, I don't think he was at all being hateful or anything. He just didn't watch the interview. And he said, somebody said that I said I was more African. I never said those words. I only stated that I'm the one residing in Africa. And all of a sudden, it became this racial thing. And that is absolutely disgusting if I'm being honest. I don't see any need for that in the sport, or in any sport for that matter. In the world, this is about two guys fighting each other. The fact that I stay in Africa will be history. The fact that I reside in Africa, won't it be history? Yes, it will. So I don't see anything wrong with saying and stating the fact that I am residing in Africa and they are not. Not saying they are not African. I'm just saying I'm residing in Africa. I wake up in Africa every day. They don't.
All right, so that was his response to that. He says that, and obviously we take the words to heart. If it didn't become a racial thing, it definitely became a racial thing after Izzy's response, April 26th, in an interview with his brother, David. This is what Israel had to say.
I know who I see. I've already talked to Dana, and I try to set up some things, but
apartheid.
Nah, I'll tell you one thing. Okay, you know what? What I actually really don't like, I'm gonna take him to school, in the octagon and on history, because what he's doing is creating divide. You can't, knowing your history. I've never questioned him as an African, because yeah, you were born in Africa, South Africa. Of course, you're an African. I've never questioned that. But who the fuck is this cracker to tell me who the fuck I am, who the fuck Kamaru is, who the fuck Ngannou is? I'm like, are you dumb? As a product of colonization, you're trying to tell me who the fuck I am. You can take the boy out of Africa, but you can never take the Africa out the boy. I never ever did that to him. I never discredited him as an African. I just, okay, there you are, cool. You want to make a fight, cool. But the fact that as a fucking cracker to tell me who the fuck I am, that pissed me off. And that's why he's my next fight. Because I don't want to fight anyone else. That this one pisses me off.
So don't take my word for it. That's his interpretation of it. Right or wrong, that's his interpretation. And that clearly shows that he is bothered and offended by it. So that was on April 26th. I asked Izzy about the comments when he was in studio on June 12th. This is what he said.
I'll say this again. I never questioned his ethnicity. I never said he's not African, even though colonization, we don't want to go over there and all that stuff.
Yeah,
he is an African because he was born in South
course.
Africa. And I never questioned that. But the fact that he was being a dickhead and, oh, we do be who the real African is, you know, I breathe African air, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, how the fuck are you going to question me, Francis, and Kamaru's blackness, our Africanness? Like, who the fuck are you? So I had to put that out there and just, I want to educate him.
So he said it first.
I'll tell you one thing.
Yeah.
You ever heard of Ancestry on Me?
Of course.
If you do Ancestry on Me on me, I know where the fuck I'm from. If you do it on him, he'll find out where the fuck he's from. And I'll tell you, it wouldn't say South Africa. I'll tell you that, it wouldn't say South Africa if you do Ancestry on Me or whatever thing, because it'll tell you where the fuck he's from. He'll know his real heritage. I know who the fuck I am, and I stand on that. No matter where in the world I am, you can take the boy out of Africa, but you can never take Africa out of the man. So I know that, and I never questioned him as an African. So who the fuck is he to question me as an African? I'm gonna manifest him winning this fight in the first round, and when he does, I'm gonna be right there in the cage so he can turn around in September. No bullshit, no, I'm hurt, this and that. Nope, we're gonna fight in Sydney in September. If it's Rob, it's Rob, whatever, but I already got a plan for Rob if it's Rob. But I really, 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 wallahi, Allah, hope it's DDP, because I will show him who the fuck I am.
All right, so it was the second round, but pretty much all of that did happen on Saturday. Shortly after that, DDP's coach, Morne Visser, once again went on his Instagram and addressed me. He wrote, just a personal message to Mr. Buttlicker Ariel Helwani. You are very big on trying to provoke the fighters and trying to stir shit up. You have tried your best with running down my fighter, Dricus du Plessis, with your bullshit racism comments. You were obviously in school one of those ass lickers who would burn your buddies, and I'm 100% sure you have never been kicked in the head or ate a fist, but yet you seem to know a lot about fighting. Not. Stay behind the computer, choose another sport, and leave the comments to the real fighters like Sonnen and Rogan. And then he says something afterwards. He writes something that I don't know what it is. It's not in English, so I'm going to leave that out because I don't want to butcher that. And so that's his interpretation. It's my fault. All of this is my fault. Interesting comments telling me to get out of the sport and leave the comments to the real fighters like Sonnen and Rogan. Obviously, Chael, a former fighter. Joe, not a former fighter, but awesome. And DDP, even on that post, wrote, Amen. After my interview with DDP, I asked his manager, Danny Rubenstein, if he was okay with the interview. He said yes. And I asked him if he thought DDP would be okay with the interview, and he said he didn't see why not. And I even wrote to DDP asking if he felt everything was fair. Didn't hear back from him, but my impression was that all was good. Then I see the comment Amen on there, so I guess I learned that everything wasn't good. That's an aside. July 8th, DDP knocks out Robert Whittaker in the second round, securing the title shot against Israel Adesanya. As you know, as he gets in the cage. It was very heated afterwards. We aren't allowed to play that because it's UFC footage. But as you all saw, it got very, very personal. And Izzy repeatedly used the N-word in the exchange. DDP held his ground. I believe, if memory serves me correct, Israel called him his African brother. And DDP responded, I am African, but I'm no brother of yours. Back and forth they went. Again, I wish personally this never happened. It would have been much better for the fight. And again, if you don't think any of this is going to be used in the promotion, just go look at Khabib and Conor, which is probably the last fight that had this sort of darkness attached to it. It will be, to a degree. I wish, because at the end of the day, they are going to fight, and this is all about prize fighting and it's show business. I just wish they kept them on the sidelines, do the staring, and that would have made the interest even greater, I think, and it would have been perfect. It would have been absolute beautiful, and maybe that could have helped them move on from all of this. But alas, it escalated even more so. Dana White was asked about the exchange afterwards at the post-fight press conference. This is what he said.
You know, I know you say, hey, this is the fight business. People say nasty things, right? But the tension between those two and kind of the racial undertones and all those things, how do you...
What were the racial undertones?
Dricus says he's the real African fighter, and so, you know, Israel dropped some N-words in there tonight.
So what was the racial? Who did? Who dropped the racial?
Israel was saying over and over, yeah.
He's black.
50 N-bombs in there.
Okay, he's black. Who gives...
I was going to say, so you don't have any concern about the way the build-up, the tension between those two?
I could care less. This is the fight business. Israel Adesanya can say whatever he wants to say. Who gives a... Why, are people about that?
Some people,
of course they are. Oh, all right, got it. Yeah.
I mean, again, no, I don't think anyone's bitching here. I think we're just trying to understand it all, and I believe that this is feigning ignorance. And or maybe he just doesn't know about the history, but like how you cannot walk away from all of this and think that there are some kind of undertones is beyond me. And I'm sure there are people out there who are going to say, you're making a mountain out of a mole. Guess what? We're living on the mountain right now. It is a mountain. Whether you want to admit it or not, I'm telling you, there's a mountain that we're living on that was created back on March 1st out of these comments, and maybe those comments were a mole, but now we're on Mount freaking Everest here, and that's 100% fact. And so those are all the assets, if you will, that got us to this point. The good news is it's probably just going to be a 2-month build. If, in fact, this fight happens on September 9th, that's exactly 2 months from yesterday. That will be great because it's going to be, it's going to be quick and it might be painful, but it's going to be intense. Now, the other things that I just want, in the interest of full transparency, to show that we are trying to just educate and inform as much as possible, obviously, as I suggested, look up the history of apartheid in South Africa, and you can probably understand why this is cutting the way it is cutting Israel Adesanya as much as it is. Prior to UFC 243, when Izzy was asked about Robert Whittaker no longer being a New Zealander and that he disowned New Zealand in a sort of way, he said, quote, "There's a line in the sand and you're on that side and I'm on this side." This is what the dissenters of Izzy are using to say, about like Izzy is now choosing sides type of thing. And then also way back in the day when he was fighting as a kickboxer in China, there's a famous post-fight interview where he said, "Black outside, Chinese inside, I am Chinese." And that's why you may see a lot of people who are saying or calling Izzy Chinese. I didn't even know about that one, truth be told. It was GC who informed me of that one. I didn't understand why people kept calling him that. And now I understand. So people are bringing this up as well. And so it is not clear cut. It is messy. It is very, very personal. And I'm curious to see. I don't think there is anything wrong with saying, I'm going to be the best to come out of this nation. I'm going to be the absolute best. I'm going to be better than that guy, that guy, that guy. I'm going to be better than the Three Kings. I do think the way it was worded back on March 1st leads you to interpret it in a different way. And I also don't think that there's anything wrong with the UFC going to both Izzy and DDP. And let's be honest, the more divisive, like clear-cut words have been used by Izzy in the cage and in that interview with his brother, saying like, hey, we understand this cuts deep, but we need to keep this in a certain place. We can't let this go too far because this can get super, super ugly and just bad for everyone. Bad for you with your blue chip sponsors, bad for the sport, bad for, the sport in Australia, which is, they've had to fight hard to get, legitimized there. Bad for everyone. There's nothing wrong with a rivalry. There's nothing wrong with bad blood. We've seen it all. But we've seen it in the past with Rashad and Rampage. It bordered on that. Look it up. It bordered on uncomfortable, historic territory. Saw it a little bit with Colby and Woodley. Saw it a little bit with Colby and Usman. I don't know if we've ever seen it this clear cut where it could just get uncomfortable. And again, DDP may have not meant any of this, but this is the way it has been interpreted. That's the perception by some people. including the guy he's about to fight. And at times in life, perception is reality, and this has to be acknowledged. So he is now, saying, I didn't mean what I said, or, and his coach is also getting involved as well. It's going to be a very heated road to that fight in September. And I hope from all this, you now understand where we stand and how we got to this point, and you could decide whose side you're on. You could decide who's in the right, who's in the wrong. And that's where we are.